Hey guys, today I want to answer a question from a viewer that was left in the comments. I opened the comments up to you guys to ask questions, and one or two people have taken me up on it, so I appreciate that. Newcomb asks, how has this alternate day fasting helped with your asthma? I've heard ADF helps with asthma, and I'm curious if that is true. Thank you for the question, Newcomb, and I'm excited to talk about this today because if there is one primary thing, there's always a multitude of issues that we deal with that lead to obesity, that lead to struggles with weight. It's never just one thing. You know, it's not just because you eat too much sugar or you don't get enough sleep. There's never just one thing that's to blame. But a primary factor for me is my lifelong asthma. I've had asthma since I was a child, and I've always used little bronchodilators. That's those little red inhalers that have a white cap that you've seen people use who have asthma. And what happened to me is that about 4 years ago, my bronchodilators quit working. In other words, I could take a puff. I started having to use them more and more and more. I could take a puff of that stuff and maybe I'd feel good for 10 minutes. But after 10 minutes, I'd go back to wheezing and coughing and everything that was happening. And anyone who's on asthma treatment usually has a long-term, a long-acting medicine as well. So what my doctors did as they, grappled with this, as I became less responsive to both the bronchodilators and corticosteroids like Dulera, Advair. I was on Advair. I was on Pulmicort. I was on Symbicort. I just went through the list of everything that's available, and nothing worked. And so my asthma was uncontrolled in the medical sense that I wheezed all the time, I coughed all the time, I was affected everywhere in every situation, at work, at sleep, at church, at home, sitting on my butt, exercising. Wherever I was, I couldn't breathe. I was severely restricted in my breathing, and those symptoms were not alleviated by any of the common steroidal medications that they prescribe to people who have asthma. So, and it just progressively got worse and worse and worse until December of 2015 when I got pneumonia and was laid out. That was it for me. After that, I couldn't go back to work. I was basically disabled for a while. And so the pulmonologist put me on a medicine that's fairly new. It's not been out for years and years, but it's called Xolair with an X. And it's an injection that I get every 2 weeks. And it took every bit of 6 months to work. So right about the time when I was saying, just stop giving me this stuff, and I was frustrated because it is an expensive medication, that's when it started to work. So I noticed I went on it in January of 2016. About August or September, I started to feel the effects of this medication and knew that it was starting to clear up my lungs. Okay, so that's my background story. While I was laying around feeling sorry for myself, not working, not doing much of anything, because when you can't breathe, that's your life. You're not going to be able to do much if you can't breathe. And it's even hard to focus mentally when you can't breathe. It's hard to focus on reading. It's hard to you just basically sit around watching TV, eating chips and drinking beer. And I was depressed, so that's what I did. I kept eating. I was eating the wrong foods. I've talked in another video about what a hedonistic, undisciplined, destructive lifestyle I was living for most of that time, and what its effects were. I gained 30 pounds on top of the weight that I already had. And so, this Xolair drug is not a drug that I can be on indefinitely. I have to come off of it after about 2 years, which will bring us up into, it's April 2017 as I'm making this video. That'll bring us up to about January of 2018. So I recently asked my doctor, my pulmonologist, what is the long-term plan? When I have to come off of this medicine, will my symptoms return and, everything go back to the way it was and I'll just be sick again? And you find out they really are just practicing medicine. They don't really know. She couldn't make any promises. And, she said you could lose 30 pounds, which I was a little bit, I thought, well, what does that have to do with my breathing? What does my weight and the increased weight have to do with my breathing? So, but when she told me that, that's when I said, I need to lose weight. And that's what led me to research intermittent fasting and to find out about alternate day fasting. And what I did was I ordered this book. This was the first printed material that I ordered to find out about this, lifestyle and what was going on and what the research was. The Alternate Day Diet by James Johnson. And there's newer books out. This was printed in 2008. But to my surprise, as I read this book, there is a section on asthma. There's a whole chapter on asthma. And so I was like, wow, this was unexpected. I didn't know this when I ordered the book. But basically, asthma is an inflammatory disease, okay? Like allergies, like arthritis, like heart disease, like possibly cancers, various cancers. And so what happens is when I'm exposed to allergens, which are absolutely everywhere, I'm allergic to dust, I'm allergic to pollen, I'm allergic to animal hair, I'm allergic to trees, all the beautiful little flowers that are coming out in the spring make me sick. And so what happens is when I breathe those things in, my bronchial pathways swell, they get inflamed, they get narrowed, and they fill with mucus. And this is the case for people who have asthma. It's an inflammatory disease. It's an inflammatory response to some outside stimuli that you're breathing into your body. And so, if you've ever had a cat scratch, or if you've ever had, some swelling, hives or something like that, just envision that on the inside in your lungs, and you'll know what we're talking about here. So, what surprised me when I read the book, The Alternate Day Diet, and I read the section about asthma, is that he talks about inflammation in the body. And he talks about how fasting lowers the inflammatory response of the body to those outside stimuli. So people who had asthma in the study that he did reported feeling better. They reported better breathing, better lung function. And, a friend of his and some people that he knew reported that their arthritis didn't bother them as much, or that their allergies didn't bother them as much. And we just passed allergy season here in North Carolina. The pollen in North Carolina is just obscene. And it's just the trees start having sex and they just go, and it just goes everywhere. There's this green cloud that just sweeps through the air. You can actually just watch it just blowing on the winds, like all this pollen that's in the air. It covers everything, covers cars. It comes into your house. It's like the Dust Bowl, in Oklahoma or whatever. It's crazy. It just gets everywhere. Well, I had the greatest allergy season, the greatest spring pollen season that I've ever experienced in my adult life. Now, what was the difference? I'm alternate day fasting. Through the whole month since March 1st, I've been alternate day fasting. And I noticed a huge difference in my allergies. I noticed no trouble at all breathing. I noticed my nose wasn't clogged. And so I noticed a huge change. So when my pulmonologist told me to lose 30 pounds, I was like, okay, well, what does weight have to do with it? So I did a little research and I found out that obesity is linked to all kinds of inflammation in the body. The more fat you have, the more inflammation is going on inside your body. and the greater the inflammation response is. And so, and my destructive habits, I've said in a previous video that I would frequently go to bed having just eaten something. And I learned that, as part of that weight that was on me, once I ate a bunch of food and stuffed myself and then laid back on the pillow and went to sleep, a lot of that food comes back up, and that can get into your lungs. And that can create an irritating response that worsens your asthma and causes you to cough. And besides that, if you've got a spare tire, if you've got a Dunlop hanging around your middle, you know that when you bend over to tie your shoes, it creates a restriction on your diaphragm. And that's what my pulmonologist was getting at there. The fat that's hanging off my love handles and on my stomach is restricting my diaphragm and making it harder to breathe, making it harder to get all the air in that I'm actually capable of. So it's two things there. The part of the terrible cycle of people who suffer with asthma or other kinds of serious inflammation in the body is that one of the first things they always prescribe is prednisone. It's almost like a dirty word to me, because prednisone, if you give it to any human being for any period of time, beyond probably a couple days, that person is going to gain weight. It is a synthetic cortisol, human stress hormone, and you will gain weight on prednisone. You won't sleep as well, you'll be irritable, you'll be cranky, and you might be able to breathe. It didn't work for me. It just made me fat. It made me moon-faced, and it put more fat in my neck, and it's like a vicious cycle. The more trouble you have breathing, the more they prescribe prednisone. They push prednisone on you, and it puts fat on you. It makes you hungry all the time. And so, I'm like, how do I break this response? So when I started reading about ADF and realizing that it lowers all kinds of inflammation. In fact, I'll just read to you the result, like his last few sentences here in the asthma chapter, where it's entitled "What It All Means." Okay, and this is from Dr. Johnson's the alternate day diet. The asthma study showed that symptoms were alleviated, pulmonary function was improved, and indicators of inflammation and oxidative stress declined as a result of the alternate day diet in this group of asthma sufferers. These findings, however, are consistent with the results in others who go on the alternate day diet, most of whom report feeling better within 10 to 14 days. So it's not a long period of time that you start to feel better, and I can attest to this. It was 10 days in, 2 weeks in, I was feeling better in a lot of ways. My body was just, thanking me for everything, all the changes that I was making. And he says that people that do this have reduced symptoms of arthritis, allergies, and asthma, and other improvements within 2 weeks. And then he says alternate day dieting will reduce inflammation and oxidative damage while also helping to control body weight for the general population. Now that's the thing. The inflammation and the body weight. You ask me, does ADF help people with asthma symptoms? And I have to say yes, because it's two-pronged attack. It kills one bird with two stones. It changes the inflammatory response of the body, and it lowers weight. So it's going at it from two directions. So, and then he concludes by saying, if the diet reduces the inflammation that is responsible for asthma symptoms, it is logical to assume that it will have a similar impact on all kinds of other chronic disorders, including heart disease. Another big one for me, another concern of mine. So, because the fat, it works on your fat deposits around your middle. It helps you to melt those off, release that grease, get rid of that stuff. And it also helps you to breathe easier and for your body not to freak out and have as much of a strong inflammatory response to the things that you're allergic to. So I appreciate the question. It's something I'm passionate about and that I'm noticing changes with. And if anyone watching this has any questions like Newcomb had, I'd be happy. Just go ahead and ask them. I'll try to answer them in video form. I appreciate all the comments. If this channel helps you, or this video helps you, or you think it helps someone else, please share it with them, and have a good day.